Incredible act of love. Maid borrows billionaire's Ferrari to save his daughter. You won't be. Maria's heart raced as she dusted the grand marble staircase, the chill of morning air brushing against her skin. In the opulent Vance mansion, golden rays filtered through crystal chandeliers, illuminating vast rooms she would never call her own. Yet today, a disquiet stirred within her, mirroring the trepidation she had felt since she first set foot in this affluent household. As a devoted maid, she poured her soul into every detail, the linen pressed to pristine perfection, the light fixtures shining brighter than her aspirations. But with every gentle sweep of the broom, the pangs of longing for a better life for Sophia pierced through her chest like shards of glass. How could she secure a future for her daughter amidst a landscape of privilege? As she continued her chores, she overheard a heated phone conversation emanating from Richard Vance's study. Caught off guard, she froze, inhaling sharply. The words "car accident" echoed ominously, and her stomach churned as Richard's voice turned frantic. At that moment, adrenaline coursed through her veins. That very second transformed her mundane world into one infused with high stakes. Emily, Richard's teenage daughter, lay in a hospital bed, and his frantic search for a solution was palpable. The clock was ticking, but she couldn't help feeling ensnared by her own burdens. How would she confront this knowledge without falling into a conflict of loyalty and responsibility? Before she could make sense of her thoughts, a powerful urge to act surged through her. The essence of motherhood surged. Protectiveness for Sophia collided with an inexplicable bond she felt for Emily. With every second, the urgency escalated. The hollow fear of standing idle gripped her throat. It wasn't just a child's life on the line, it was an opportunity to mend and strengthen bonds in ways she'd never imagined possible. Despite her heart's desperate calling for caution, hope surged within her. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Heightened urgency consumed her thoughts as a bold idea crystallized. A fiery red Ferrari gleamed in the driveway, a symbol of everything she was not. Tension throbbed in her chest as she stood at the threshold of the Vance's world. She hesitated, swallowed hard, and stepped towards the sleek machine, her breath catching. The imagined taste of freedom intertwined with dread. She'd be borrowing it for a good cause, she rationalized. Navigating the bustling streets, her mind raced. Memories of sleepless nights working multiple jobs echoed in her thoughts, relentless reminders of the sacrifices she'd made. A mother first, she thought desperately as she inched toward the hospital, the adrenaline fueling her drive. But then, a police roadblock flickered into sight, its red and blue lights signaling doom. What have I done? She thought, panic clawing at her insides. Every decision hung suspended, her choices teetering on a precipice between morality and love. Would she risk everything for a girl who represented a glimpse of the life she craved for Sophia? The weight of her actions tightened around her heart, tightening like a vice. In that moment, she understood that the boundaries dividing their lives were stark, yet so fragile. The man of this house would soon discover his coveted car was missing, but he'd remain oblivious to in whom his family's lifeblood now resided. Maria's sacrifice stood before her as the embodiment of true motherhood, yet it threatened to unravel her very being. As Richard returned to find the Ferrari absent, an agonizing confrontation loomed, one that would expose the fragile paths connecting two distinctly different worlds. The choices made today would haunt them both in ways none of them had yet to comprehend. Maria felt the wind whip through her hair as she navigated the streets, the gleaming Ferrari carrying her toward an uncertain destiny. Each turn, each stoplight felt like a symbolic crossroads, where choices ran deeper than mere navigation. The familiar hum of the city faded into the distance, and with it her previous life. She was acutely aware of the enormity of her decision. It wasn't just the car she had borrowed, but her dignity too. Yet the image of Emily in that hospital bed propelled her forward, filling her resolve with a fierce desperation. But as she rolled into the hospital parking lot, the vibrancy of her hope collided with the looming reality of consequences. Would saving Emily strengthen the bond between their families, or would it only serve to fracture the delicate balance of her own existence? Richard would undoubtedly be furious upon discovering his prized possession absent, unleashing not just anger, but a slew of repercussions that might ensnare Maria. The potential loss of her job threatened to unravel everything, but staying idle felt like watching another life slip away unchallenged. As she parked the car and stepped out, her heart slammed against her chest. The sterile scent of antiseptics enveloped her, holding the unmistakable weight of fear and grief. Her hands trembled, and she took a deep breath, grounding herself before entering the building. Each step reminded her of the countless sacrifices she had made so that Sophia could have a fighting chance. Would becoming an ally to the Vances, not only saving Emily but also bridging their worlds, yield the change she desired? Taking a moment to study her breath, Maria approached the reception desk, her fingers fidgeting nervously with her apron. The receptionist eyed her query warily as she asked for directions to Emily's room. The response was curt but clear. Every word exchanged felt like a seed planted, the roots of her intentions pushing down uncertain of what might grow. The air changed as she climbed the stairs, each step amplifying her determination to confront her place in this narrative. They were worlds apart, yet now a connection sparked with the possibility of shared understanding. Would reaching out to Richard, despite the chaos looming ahead, open doors she never knew were closed? Walking into the hospital room, she steeled herself against the overwhelming sight of the unconscious girl connected to various machines beeping rhythmically, a sonorous reminder of life hanging in balance. At that moment, resolve crystallized within her. She wasn't merely an interloper, she was a mother, capable of wielding love as a force of action, for both her daughter and for Emily. The quiet desperation morphed into proactive potential. If she could find a way to express her intentions to Richard, perhaps he could see her bravery instead of just her foolishness. Emerging from the shadow of the hospital bed, she noticed a subtle movement near the door. Richard stood, his expression a vortex of bewilderment and hurt. His eyes locked onto her, and a storm brewed. A tempest of anger, betrayal, and confusion flickering there. "Maria, what are you doing here?" His voice trembled slightly, eyes darting to the machines and back to her. It was a question that held 1,000 accusations, 1,000 layers of complexity. Maria drew in a deep breath, ready to plant her truths. Words, raw and vulnerable, began to take shape on her lips. "I had to do something. I couldn't just stand by. Emily needed help." With the tension thick enough to cut through, Maria prepared herself to face the ramifications of her actions. It was a delicate moment, tethering their fates inextricably together. In that exchange, a spark flickered, an understanding waiting to ignite or burn to ash, the outcome uncertain. But as she took a step forward, ready to continue, Maria sensed an unexpected shift in the air. What would his response reveal about both of their futures? The moment of truth had arrived. Richard's brow furrowed, the surprise etched into his features, deepening with a shimmering layer of disbelief. Maria felt the urge to retreat under the weight of his glare, but she forcibly anchored her position. Her heart raced as adrenaline surged through her veins, juxtaposing fear with determination. "Help? You think taking my car helps?" Richard's voice barely concealed the simmering ire. "You are completely out of line." "You don't understand," Maria pleaded, her voice trembling slightly but steadying. "I had to come. I can't sit back and do nothing when there's something I could do. Emily needs her family. She needs all of us." The tension in the room thickened as Richard's disbelief faltered and the flicker of humanity broke through his steely facade. For a brief instant, his rigid stand— "I know our families are complicated, but I refuse to believe love can't push through the chaos. Emily deserves to know her worth, and this is the only thing I could think to do." Richard's expression sparked with agitation. "And now you think you're the one to save her? This isn't a fairy tale. You just borrowed my car, Maria." The pain in his voice cut like a knife, and frustration rippled through her. "You're right," Maria conceded, feeling smaller but unyielding. "But it was never just about the car. It's about the choices we make in times of crisis. I'm standing here because I believe, deep down, despite everything, we can find a path forward. For Emily." The acknowledgement of their shared desperation hung in the air. Richard's defenses faltered momentarily as his gaze shifted to the small girl lying helplessly in the bed. The rhythmic beeping of the machines filled the silence, amplifying every unspoken word, every unaddressed fear. "Why are you so willing to step into this mess?" he asked at last, his tone softer though still laced with skepticism. "What do you hope to gain from all this?" Maria paused, her throat tightening, wrestling with the myriad of emotions. "Because I know what it's like to fight for someone you love. I want Sophia to grow up knowing that love is stronger than fear." Richard absorbed her words. She could sense his internal conflict, caught between his anger and the profound realization of their shared human experience. Was he beginning to see her as more than an intruder in his world of privilege? "Your daughter still needs you," he replied finally, the weight of responsibility settling in his voice, as if reminding him of his own role. "Your sacrifices mean something, Maria, but this isn't just about a car. It's about families and futures intertwined. I'm not sure how much trust I can place in you right now." "I understand," Maria said, humility forcing her to lean into vulnerability. "But isn't it worth exploring? What if we came together instead of letting pain drive us further apart? Let's focus on Emily. Please, let's be allies." There it was, her vulnerability as a mother morphing into a point of strength, igniting a flicker of hope amidst uncertainty. Richard's posture shifted ever so slightly, the ice of his defenses beginning to thaw, if only just. Heavy footsteps echoed in the sterile hallway and drowned the air with a newfound sense of urgency. Nurse after nurse whisked past, their determined strides emphasizing the fragility of time. A moment of clarity surged through Maria. She had no choice but to act. "Emily's life is at stake, Richard. I don't know you well, but I do know love. Love that compels action. Love that demands we fight. Let's put aside our anger and fix this together." Richard's expression betrayed his deliberation. The cogs of his mind visibly turned, weighing the burden of his decision. And as another nurse entered the room, carrying with her news of Emily's condition, Maria prepared herself for Richard's response. Would he choose unity or allow his pride to sever any chance at reconciliation? The stakes had never been higher, and the intensity of the moment bore down on them like a freight train. They were teetering on the edge of a decision that could redefine them each forever. Just then, the nurse froze, her eyes filled with alarm. "We have a code blue in the pediatrics unit," she called out, the urgency piercing the stillness. Richard's eyes went wide, glancing at Maria, their fates dangling precariously over a precipice, waiting for one of them to take the leap. Would this be the moment that changed everything? Richard's breath hitched as the words "code blue" ricocheted in the air, heavy with dread. In that moment, the sterile smell of antiseptic surged with an intense urgency, sharpening his senses. He turned his attention to the nurse, but Maria's voice cut through the chaos like a beacon. "Richard, we can't just stand here." Her insistence shifted his focus back to the little girl lying immobile in the bed, her fragile existence held hostage by a myriad of tubes and wires. He had always pictured himself as a protector. How had he allowed this helplessness to consume him? "Follow me. We need to get to Emily now," he finally commanded, shaking off the fog of uncertainty. The urgency was palpable, and Maria's decisive nod grew into a silent partnership. In that fleeting, adrenaline-fueled moment, their confrontation morphed into a synchronous act of action. Racing through the corridor, the sterile environment blurred past them. Richard felt the weight of his responsibility, pressing down like a thunderous pulse. Each step toward the pediatrics unit forced him to wrestle with the tidal wave of regret crashing over him. He had given himself too fully to his sorrow, standing on the sidelines of his daughter's fight. "Emily deserves a chance," Maria said, her voice steady next to him. "We can make that happen." Her silent resolve made Richard acutely aware of the callousness he'd shielded himself with. The image of Maria's daughter, Sophia, flashed in his mind, a stark reminder of the innocence at risk. Once they arrived, the scene unfolded as pure chaos. Doctors rushed in and out, operating under the intensity of the emergency. Richard's hands trembled slightly. The adrenaline that had fueled him moments ago now clashed with an agonizing hunger for clarity. He couldn't let fear dictate his actions any longer, nor could he afford to retreat into his fortress of solitude. When a lead doctor made eye contact, Richard felt the foundation of their hopes teeter. "We need some family members in the room," he declared. Each word was a lifeline tossed into the storm. Richard hesitated, heart pounding, when he felt Maria's reassuring grip of his arm. "Let's go," she urged softly, the spark of determination in her eyes igniting his own. He nodded, adrenaline slipping into a new resolve. Inside, the operational team worked tirelessly, punctuating the air with technical terms that glimmered with both desperation and precision. Richard's heart roared in his chest, pulsating with a fierce, unfamiliar energy. He had to do something. He had to push beyond his fears and failures to be a part of the solution. He found himself drawn to a leadership role among the shadows of the medical team. "How can we help?" The question seemed to echo beyond the sterile walls. His confidence surprised even him. The realization washed over him like a flood of warmth. He was no longer a hapless bystander, but had transitioned into an ally of action. Maria, too, shifted her energy, volunteering to assist where she could, collecting supplies and clearing passages. An unseen bond was forming between them, a wisp of collaboration born from the unfolding crisis. They were no longer enemies, but fellow warriors in a shared fight for Emily. As minutes felt like hours, the lead doctor barked commands. Richard found himself in tune with the rhythm of urgency, making decisions that seemed instinctual. The tension transformed into a new sense of purpose. He felt more alive than he had in months. Time blurred, the echoing beeps of life-saving machines mingling with hopeful breaths. And yet, just as Richard was gathering strength, the lead doctor turned, a shadow crossing his gaze. "We need to stabilize her before it's too late." The words sank like stones, reverberating in his soul. Richard exchanged a choked look with Maria, their united resolve now hanging precariously. Could they truly alter fate? Would their collective actions steer Emily back from the brink? Back outside the room, Richard's contemplation deepened. Amidst the madness, he began to uncover a profound truth about himself: the potential to rise above the despair that had once shackled him. In that instant, his determination hardened into steel, ready to forge ahead against the encroaching darkness. But as he stood at the crossroads of possibility and fear, another wave of uncertainty washed over him. What sacrifices would he have to make to save Emily? Would he be able to confront his own demons in the process? These looming questions echoed in the back of his mind as he clenched his fists, preparing for both the battle ahead and the undeniable journey of reconciliation that lay within. As the relentless beeping intensified from the other side of the door, Richard took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what was to come. The moment of truth approached, and an undeniable reckoning loomed on the horizon. Richard's heart raced with the urgency resonating throughout the sterile halls. This was not just another moment. It was the defining intersection of his life. The chaos around him receded, focusing his instincts on one singular need: to protect Emily. As he stood waiting outside the door, doubt and determination battled fiercely within him, wrest in control of his emotional landscape. "Richard," Maria's voice broke through the din of uncertainty. She was next to him, her expression reflecting a mix of concern and resolve. "Whatever happens in there, we're here to fight for her together." He nodded, but struggled to find the words. What could he say that encompassed the tumult within him? Deep down, he recognized that this wasn't solely about Emily. It was about facing the darker corners of his own existence. Guilt, regret, and the weight of failure loomed large over him like a storm cloud. But with Maria's presence, it felt manageable, as if they were both armed for a battle against fate itself. "But what if I fail again?" Richard finally blurted out, his voice almost a whisper. She turned towards him, her gaze unwavering. "You won't know unless you try," she replied firmly. "You've already taken the first step by being here. That counts for more than you realize." In those simple words, a flicker of something shifted in Richard, an ember of purpose igniting beneath his fear. He realized that this moment demanded more than hope. It required action. Perhaps he couldn't save Emily alone, but in that realization lay an acknowledgement of his own fragility and, oddly, a sense of power. What he had lacked in the past was not just confidence, but the realization that vulnerability could foster resilience. "Let's do this," he said, clenching his fists one last time, a declaration more than a submission to despair. Together, they stepped toward the door, their fates intertwined. Inside, the frantic energy of the medical team enveloped him. It was eerily ordered chaos, and Richard quickly fell into pace with the rhythm of urgency. He felt alive in a way he had not known since the darkness had cast its shadow over his life. A feeling long buried rose within him, an instinct to support, to jump in where others might hesitate. He noticed supplies scattered about, a defibrillator not yet in use. Rational thought registered that this was critical, yet his intuition surged, whispering for action. He moved to fetch it, his hands steady and fierce. Maria seemed to anticipate his needs, rushing to collect the necessary equipment without hesitation. Every moment in the room felt charged, words exchanged, sharper, glances filled with meaning. The doctors directed them, allowing Richard and Maria to assist, and they became an integral part of the tapestry of life and death playing out before them. "Richard, help me over here. We need to stabilize her," one of the doctors called, throwing Richard headlong into the fray. He moved instinctively, his training as a bystander splintering as he shifted into a participant emboldened by purpose rather than fear. In those moments, Richard began to see his value more clearly. Though he had once been paralyzed by sorrow and a sense of inadequacy, action transformed him. Asking questions, assessing available resources, facilitating communication among the frantic efforts of the medical team, these were his roles now, each small contribution planting seeds of redemption. As he rejoined Mariah at the workstation, breathing heavily, something crystallized within him. He was not merely hovering above the line of a great divide. He was standing at it, teetering precariously, yet ready to leap. Yet the unsolved question loomed. If all this went awry, would he be able to handle the emotional fallout? The night was dark, promising nothing but uncertainty at the other end. Richard felt a powerful surge of desperation and hope intertwine within him. He wasn't just saving Emily, he was rediscovering himself. "Stay sharp, Richard. We're in this until the end." The urgency in Mariah's voice sharpened his resolve further. He forced himself to focus even as worry coiled tighter. Could he handle this? With every frantic heartbeat, Richard braced for inevitable fear. And yet, an unfamiliar strength surged through him, pushing back against the darkness he had once surrendered to. Just then, the lead doctor interrupted Richard's thoughts, eyes flashing with intensity. "We're losing her!" The urgency stirred Richard, and he knew there would be no hiding anymore. It was time to confront the impossible and face his defining moment. Richard's gaze connected with Mariah's, her faith in him radiating through the chaos. He would not falter. Could this be the moment where past failures transformed into growth? What further challenges awaited him, just beyond the threshold of fear? The room swelled with frantic energy, and Richard's pulse throbbed in his ears. He could feel the weight of expectation, not just from the medical team, but from himself. Every second that slipped past felt like an eternity as he stood at the edge of possibility, wrestling with his limitations. "We need clearer communication," he called out, collapsing the boundaries of fear that had once imprisoned him. The panic in the room may have been palpable, but Richard's voice rang with newfound clarity. "Richard, can you take over monitoring her vitals?" the lead doctor instructed, his brows knitted in concentration. Without waiting for a reply, he continued, "Mariah, assist with the next medication dosage." Richard nodded sharply, stepping into the role as if it had always belonged to him. He focused on the machinery beeping rhythmically, each sound echoing like a heartbeat, steady, persistent. There was an odd tranquility in grasping this responsibility. Could it really be so fulfilling to contribute tangibly, to be an instrument of hope? While monitoring the display in front of him, Richard's mind whirled through a spectrum of emotions. Gone were the days when he would shrink back in terror during crises, paralyzed by unworthiness and doubt. Now, confronted by dire stakes, he was aware of the stakes at hand. Emily's life balanced precariously against the fragility of time. As he called out the vital stats with precision, his confidence began to wash over him like a warm tide. It was empowering, a burgeoning reality that he could make a difference. Each syllable felt like a small victory, transforming the fear that once ruled him into determination. "Her blood pressure is dropping," Maria announced, urgency lacing her every word. Richard's eyes darted back to the monitor, dread creeping in again. They were on a razor's edge, with every heartbeat counting down. The reality of failure clawed at him momentarily, but then he remembered Maria's unwavering support. Deploying that memory became an anchor, anchoring him against the tempest of doubt. "Let's prep for the next steps. What do we need?" Richard asked. There was no room for hesitation. "More fluid and keep her stable," the doctor's voice commanded, restoring the frantic atmosphere. Richard's hands moved swiftly. He assumed an authoritative role, delegating tasks as his instincts kicked in. "Maria, check the IV line. We need to make sure it's flowing properly." This newfound assertiveness felt thrilling. He could feel the stirrings of long-forgotten aspirations, the reasons he had ventured into this field to begin with. He allowed a spark of ambition to snuff out the remnants of despair that once clouded his vision. But as he felt momentarily uplifted, a gnawing unease lurked within him. If he was sharpening incompetence, what would happen when they emerged from this fog? Would his growth linger, or would it be just another fleeting moment lost to the chaos of life? "Richard, stay focused," a doctor commanded sharply, and his energy surged back. This moment demanded attention, his full attention. There was no room for fear, no room for doubt, only resolve. Just as he settled into the rhythm of responsibility, the lead doctor's voice broke through once more. "We're losing her pulse." Richard's heart dropped, the weight of the dire news plunging him back into darkness. This was the pivotal moment of truth, the cause and effect pairing that demanded his utmost response. He looked at Maria and saw a reflection of his own determination. "We can't give up. We need to try everything we have." "Grant her strength, Richard," Maria whispered intensely, her eyes searching his as though she fought for him to absorb that courage. He drew a deep breath, grasping the momentum as they prepped for the push, a physical embodiment of what he truly felt within. As they moved swiftly, Richard sensed that while unease could unfurl into chaos, action could give rise to something far greater.
Was he truly stepping up, or was this just a momentary bravado? With his heart racing, he absorbed Maria's steadying presence once again. The answer lay ahead, cloaked in the same uncertainty but glittering with a promise of hope. As they surged forward, could the choice he made today redefine who he was in the aftermath of this battle? The push for Emily's life might intertwine with their own reckoning, but would he be ready to confront whatever awaited on the other side of this fray? Emily's heart monitor beeped rhythmically, a reminder of the urgency pressing against them. Each sound commanded Richard to shift gears, to articulate the next steps, even as fear clawed at his insides. He had become the fulcrum around which the hopeful yet desperate scenario revolved. "Let's initiate CPR," the lead doctor ordered as panic surged again. But Richard could feel the tide of determination settle more deeply within him. CPR was a well-practiced maneuver, one he had performed countless times in training. Yet now it felt personal. "Emily, hold on, we're here," he murmured instinctively, although she couldn't hear him. "Richard, focus," Maria snapped, her fierce urgency grounding him once more. He locked eyes with her, a silent pact forming between two dedicated individuals battling against time. They were not merely participants in an ongoing emergency, they were fighters, embracing the weight of their calling. For the next few moments, each action became a choreography, choreographed by instinct and determination. Richard cradled Emily's head, administering compressions with the rhythm of a heartbeat, concentrated and unwavering. As he pressed down hard, releasing, compressing again, a pep talk flowed through his mind. This was the moment of truth, not just for Emily, but for him. Was this what he was meant to do? Each breath he forced into her was layered with hope, threading an invisible connection between them. Each push felt like a battle against his former self, that version of Richard who detested conflict and relinquished control. No, this man was someone who embraces challenges. He would not falter now. "Come on, Emily, you can do this." The desperation in his voice broke away before he could stifle it. It demanded corollary energy, and it punctured the air, a clarion call for strength. "Her pulse is weak, but it's still there," Maria reported, her eyes flitting back and forth, part technician, part anchor. Richard's heart surged at the glimmer of hope. He had not just performed, he had engaged, stepping fully into the realm of possibility, ushering prospects of stability into a once fleeting life. But with that spark of revelation came a familiar pang of self-doubt that trickled in, faint yet insistent. What if he faltered? What if this surge of competence was ephemeral? Would he be able to stand firm when the dust settled? "Richard, we need to clear her airway." Another command cut through his thoughts, and he nodded, the clarity of responsibility fortifying him. As he transitioned to opening her airway, instinct propelled him, mingled with the gravity of his actions. He was no longer a side character in someone else's story. He'd become the protagonist, participating in a life-altering performance that demanded authenticity. "Get the defibrillator ready," a doctor shouted, sealing their determination in mutual urgency. With the paddles in hand, Richard felt the embers of anxiety light up, sustaining him far better than the all-consuming fear he once harbored. He was atop a wave of growth, embracing his capacity for determination and skills he had nurtured over time. The fear still lingered, but it morphed into something more familiar, a guide rather than a trap. "On my count," the doctor began, and Richard locked back into focus, heart racing with the thrill of doing something vital, something that mattered. As the doctor's cadence echoed through the room, something within Richard sharpened. He was not just responding, he was engaging with purpose. He would confront whatever uncertainties awaited, shaping fear into determination, doubt into courage. 3, 2, 1, clear! The sharp crack of energy in the air pierced the room as Richard prepared for the rebound of what they had collectively charged forth. Something had shifted inside him, an unmistakable growl of resilience intermingling with the quiet whispers of self-doubt. He braced himself for the moment of truth. Would it be victory or a harder lesson learned? Would he step away from the battle forged anew, or would he find himself in the same cycle of avoidance he had long feared? As anticipation hovered like an electric current before him, Richard realized that each second felt precious. The past drifted along the periphery, and all that remained was the present, ready to unveil what awaited beyond it. Would this truly be the moment that redefined him? Or would it unravel into a palpable reminder of a fight unquenched? The urgency was building, and as the room held its breath around them, the outcome hinged on a single electric pulse of potential waiting to explode into revelation. Richard's breath caught in his throat as the air crackled with tension. In that moment, he could feel destiny pulling at him, coaxing him to embrace who he was becoming. The defibrillator's pads felt cool against his trembling hands, and he breathed deeply, gathering the remnants of hesitation. He couldn't just stand by. He had to act. This was not merely a test of skill. This was a fight for a life intertwined with his own growth. Clear! The command shattered the stillness as he pressed the pads against Emily's chest. A surge of electric energy coursed through her, visible even to the untrained eye, a stark reminder of the thin line separating life and death. In that instant, Richard's resolve crystallized into something formidable. He was no longer the uncertain intern hiding behind textbooks. This was his baptism by fire. His ability to confront fear had morphed into a fierce, blazing determination. He watched as Emily's body reacted and felt the disconnection and the bond simultaneously. Time had ceased to exist, and it was only them, embers of hope amidst swirling shadows of despair. Each repetition of compressions started feeling like an affirmation, anchoring him in the act of saving a life while liberating him from the constraints of self-doubt. Her pulse is stabilizing. Good job, Richard! Maria's voice shot through his psyche, igniting a spark of pride deep within him that he had seldom allowed to flourish. Until now, he had battled a relentless inner critic who taunted him with his past failures. But in this high-stakes moment, a sliver of confidence pushed him forward. The shadows receded momentarily. A previous version of himself would have second-guessed every movement. Yet now he understood that the only path forward lay in trusting himself. Each assessment and each decision now clear and deliberate. He was carving out his own identity, one that embraced conflict and resilience, a stark shift from mere compliance to active, unwavering engagement. The pressure tightened around him as the seconds trickled by, mostly deafening in their silence. But Richard wasn't fazed. He was drowning the self-doubt in a burgeoning sense of courage, one breath and one compression at a time. "Richard, check her vitals again," the lead doctor instructed, and he complied without hesitation. The quickening rhythm of his heart matched the urgency of his hands, a synchrony in their aim to save her. As Emily's stats flickered on the display, he could feign composure, but inwardly the tension coiled tighter. Would this brief resurrection be enough? Could he truly alter the course of their lives in this stark hospital room? "Continue CPR. We need to get her heartbeat back," another voice echoed. But Richard absorbed the commands like fuel, igniting the flame within him. In that critical juncture, doubts coiled like thick vines around his sense of self. Could he sustain this focus beyond the moment? Would this courage translate into his everyday life, dissolving the barriers he erected against himself? As he pumped his hands down, he fought through the gnawing realization that the life-changing pressure could shatter him just as easily as it might make him whole. Would he forever be defined by this moment? All his formal training paled in comparison to this raw experience. 3, 2, 1, clear! His blood echoed the final counts with drum-like ferocity, drowning out fears that whispered of inadequacy. He brought the defibrillator down for the third time, a lifeline thrown amidst uncertainty. Richard held his breath, the room suspended in a collective gasp, and somewhere inside him, a new resolve began to rise from the ashes of his former self. This was more than a moment. It was a launchpad into the depths of his potential. But as the energy charged through her and the monitor began to beep more steadily, an unsettling thought loomed. What if he had just awakened a deeper responsibility that he wasn't ready for? As the realization struck him, an unexpected turn emerged. Someone in the room had started yelling, not in victory, but in caution. The tension shifted once more, and Richard faced a sudden dark undercurrent that threatened to unravel the hope they had just stitched together. What had he inadvertently exposed himself to? As the atmosphere morphed from triumph to trepidation, Richard understood this was not merely a matter of saving Emily. He felt the weight of a reckoning approaching, a revelation waiting just beyond the threshold of his newfound courage. Would his growth withstand the weight of this reality? Richard's heart raced, the previously electrifying moment receding to a hushed anxiety as he turned to the source of the disruption. A nurse shouted across the room, panic seeping into her voice. "We need to stabilize her, now!" The emergency team moved like a well-rehearsed drill, their actions precise as they circled Emily's bed. Richard felt as if he were standing in the eye of a storm, the chaos swirling faster around him while he remained unnervingly still. A chill ran down his spine as the reality of the situation sank deeper. This wasn't a controlled environment stitched together by textbooks. This was life, raw and unyielding. "Richard!" Maria's voice jolted him back to the present. "Focus! We need that IV hooked up and the blood results on the double." She thrust a syringe into his hand, and he instinctively began filling the flask with fluid. The once quiet confidence he had briefly tasted dissipated, slipping away like fine sand through his fingers. His inner critic roared to life, projecting all the countless what-ifs. What if he administered the wrong dosage? What if he caused more harm? Each thought like a dagger aimed at the core of his newfound determination. Yet the urgency of the situation pressed against him, each ticking second amplifying the stakes. As he prepared the IV, his eyes darted from Emily's pale face to the monitor screens, scrutinizing each heartbeat, each drop in her stats, alarming him anew. Just moments ago, he felt he was on the cusp of transformation. What if this moment instead marked a regression, a return to the self-doubt he had fought so hard to conquer? The conflict within him deepened, wrestling thoughts of inadequacy against the knowledge that he needed to rise above it. "Take a breath, Richard," he whispered to himself, channeling the resolve that had sparked in the heat of the moment. He couldn't afford to break. Each moment here was feeding a metamorphosis he had anxiously awaited. The sterile hospital room echoed sharp breaths and muffled orders. Underneath the cacophony, Richard's desire for growth surged like a tide. This experience, debilitating as it felt, was sculpting him. The realization that he could sustain life, that he could assert himself in the chaos, ignited something primal within him. He was not just an aspiring intern. He was a participant, an agent in his destiny. Harnessing the flurry of thoughts, he steadied his hands and expertly hooked up the IV line. The blood work results flashed on the monitor, bringing the team a course of action to pursue. Each second he invested pulled him further along this new trajectory, nudging him toward competence he had not fully understood he possessed. "Action! We need the adrenaline," Maria barked, and the urgency in her voice forced Richard's attention back to Emily. He carefully passed the adrenaline syringe to the doctor, feeling the weight of it passing between them. Not just a syringe, but a tether to his evolving identity as a confident practitioner. In that moment, an exhilarating clarity washed over him. He understood that he could no longer hide behind theory and doubt. He had to wield his skills with conviction, even if the fear of failure also lurked.
In the periphery, what if, in this struggle, he was finally discovering the strength that had always been waiting to blossom? As they administered the medication, the tension in the room shifted again, albeit subtly. Eyes widened and breath was collectively held. Could this be the pivot they needed? Richard's gaze traced the monitor as it oscillated between hope and despair, a constant reminder that so much depended on their next actions. Then, just when he thought the battle might crest toward victory, another yell rang out. "Her pressure is dropping!" Richard's pulse quickened. Could he handle this relentless tide of adversity? Just as he was starting to feel the spark of resilience burn brightly, another wave of uncertainty threatened to crash over him. He had embraced this moment, but would he be able to step up again when the next storm arrived? Or had he merely scratched the surface of his true potential? Now, with the stakes rising and clouds of doubt gathering once more, he felt this crisis becoming a crucible for his character, testing his resolve in ways he never thought possible. Would he rise to meet this challenge, or would he find himself submerged beneath it all, unable to swim back to the surface? In the wake of the chaos, a profound silence enveloped the room, momentarily halting time as Richard stood at the precipice of transformation. Every pulse of the heart monitor echoed the urgency of the situation, yet amidst the tension, clarity began to crystallize within him. This wasn't just about saving Emily, it was about redefining who he was meant to become. "Adjust the IV flow," Maria commanded, her tone slicing through the somber energy, redirecting him back to action. Without hesitation, he made the adjustment, his hands steadying through sheer will. This was no longer the man who hesitated, bombarded by nightmares of failure. He was evolving into someone capable of creating change, driven by instinct and purpose. His inner turmoil subsided with each calculated movement. Richard felt a powerful surge of confidence swell within him. This was the culmination of all those hours of training, the dozens of scenarios played out in his mind, now animated by real stakes in direct confrontation with his self-doubt. This exact moment was more than just a trial. It was a testament to resilience, and he was becoming the embodiment of that resilience right before his own eyes. "Her heart rate's picking up," a nurse shouted, and the confirmation of progress sent adrenaline surging. Richard looked at Maria, her unwavering support lighting a fire in his spirit. Together, without a word, they infused a silent agreement. They were allies in this fight. The atmosphere shifted again, charged with hope, as the doctors directed a clarity of purpose around Emily. Richard's breath melded into the rhythm of teamwork, where doubt was transformed into a shared mission, solidifying his understanding of what it meant to stand beside someone in a crisis. "Richard, can you lead?"
"On the next round of compressions?" the doctor requested, and he felt ownership surge through him. "Yes, I can." The words, once grappling with timidity, emerged with steady authority. With confidence unmatched, he positioned himself, determined to bear the weight of their hopes. As he began compressions again, visualizing every bit of love and energy fueling this small girl's fight, Richard finally understood his purpose. Every effort propelled him forward, confirming that vulnerability transcended weakness. It became the source of strength that summoned courage against the tides of despair. "Greater! You're doing great!" Maria encouraged, her eyes gleaming with the conviction of partnership. By the time the doctor shouted, "Clear!" yet again, Richard felt immersed in an unwavering determination to protect Emily. This wasn't a simple moment. He was embracing his destiny, one he had previously merely dreamt of. The balance tipped. He could see how deeply interconnected their fates had become. His drive to save Emily was born out of his fight for his daughter Sophia. With each shock that coursed through Emily, Richard's mind raced with reflections. How could he return to a life defined by avoidance? This was a pivotal moment for him. No longer would he allow fear to govern his decisions or inhibit his voice. The fear of failure had morphed into a display of genuine competence, and it felt liberating. The monitor's steady beep slowly transitioned to a stronger rhythm. Emily was coming back, and as Richard breathed in the mix of hope and anticipation, something beautifully transformative unfurled within him. Clarity burst forth through the chaos. This would not be the end. It was instead just the beginning. As the atmosphere shifted from desperate urgency towards tentative optimism, Richard exchanged glances with Maria, now steadfast colleagues forged in the fire of adversity. They were not just fighting for Emily's life. They were crafting lives anew, empowered by the truth that strength is often woven through moments of vulnerability. When a doctor finally declared, "We've stabilized her," a wave of collective relief filled the space. Richard felt tears prick at the edges of his eyes, new to experiencing success through collaboration. Not just success for Emily, but a personal achievement that reconceptualized him, not just as a bystander in their world, but a fully engaged protagonist in his own story. Exiting the room, he stood tall, no longer shrouded in memories of past failures, but standing proudly as the man he was always meant to be. His transformation was not merely professional. It was the reframing of a life once burdened by self-doubt. Now he could embrace uncertainty and forge ahead into unknown territories. Richard emerged from the chaotic cocoon of emergency, firmly anchored in self-awareness. The battle had both altered his trajectory and established him anew as a competent and determined individual. He would no longer retreat into shadows. He would boldly pursue the light of potential. It dawned upon him that this experience was a clarion call, a challenge
to continuously invest in becoming more in both his personal life's ambitions and professional pursuits. Each day from now on would be an opportunity not just to act, but to wholeheartedly engage, illuminating the path for both him and Sophia. And as he walked away, a newfound purpose radiated through him. Each step echoed the promise of the man he could become, a father, a protector, a resilient individual, ready to embrace everything life may throw at him. This was his moment of metamorphosis, solidified by action and resolve. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.